Welcome to this session of the Risk and Compliance Exchange. My guest is Dan Burns, the Compliance Senior Manager for Global Technical Interlock at Splunk. Dan, thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk about some interesting compliance developments within the federal government and help, not only our customers, but maybe even future customers and any other customers realize what they can get out of these new compliance regimes as well, too.
I'm glad you bring up this excitement over compliance. A lot of people look at compliance and raise their eyes and go, oh, God. But what we've seen over the last, if you will, dozen years or so is the government really is looking at, okay, how can we get vendors to do some things that used to be pretty pleased to, okay, now you got to do them. And I think the first one to start with is FedRAMP, the cloud security program. I think, that's really grown. And obviously the folks at GSA and running the FedRAMP office are really trying to make some changes. Give me some impressions of FedRAMP these days, and how does it continue to need to evolve?
Well, I think the FedRAMP of about a decade ago is not here anymore. I think the program has really evolved, even we were just talking about this internally at Splunk, less than 5 years ago, there were hardly any high authorized services on the FedRAMP marketplace. And now you're seeing a new one like every other couple months. So we just came out with Splunk Cloud FedRAMP High to meet the demand for customers who are asking to host our high impact data. So not only are you seeing these new, more stringent authorizations like high being requested from the federal government, but you're seeing also an increase from the moderate impact level as well too. And I think we've hit kind of a peak, hopefully, in terms of this amount of material that's being sent to the FedRAMP PMO. And I think they understand that what they have to deal with, especially with FedRAMP becoming law as well too. And the actions I've seen from the FedRAMP PMO over the past few months, their plan for the next few years, all symbolize a need to further streamline processes to help all these CSPs go through this FedRAMP process more efficiently and effectively as well too. That includes things like automation, new guidance for how to implement certain technologies, and new governance methods coming from the federal government as well too. I think what we're seeing from the FedRAMP PMO is a new step in a direction that is showing more handholding than before, more explanation. I think we're getting a lot more out of the FedRAMP PMO than we have in the past decade. And not that we didn't before. I think the times have evolved. I think the answers are becoming more clear to the FedRAMP PMO. And I think they're able to give better answers now that they have more of these situations.
I want to go back to something you said around the high impact level. That to me is one of the biggest surprises. Maybe surprise is not the best word, but signs that agencies are more comfortable using cloud, are wanting to put more, if you will, sensitive data in cloud services. What does it mean to get to the high level? What should other vendors who are considering it, considering how much excitement there is around it, what should they keep in mind as they walk through that? You guys, as you said, went through it just recently.
Yep, it's a very stringent process. It involves a lot of work in terms of coordination with engineering and all the teams, products. It requires everyone to be on the same page. And kind of like what you said too, you were seeing a lot of moderate impact offerings come on the market at first, not a lot of high impact offerings. I think over time, the federal government all these agencies realized, hey, this is working for me at the moderate impact level. They were testing it out. They were seeing if this was going to be a viable program for them, whether it was sustainable from their own end in terms of sponsoring these offerings as well too. And over time, I think what was realized was, hey, this is a really successful program. I'm really liking how we're able to see our POAMs from our various vendors, the SSP, really easily able to see everything in front of me and really be able to make a risk-based determination in terms of, should I be able to use this product or not? Maybe I wait for them to remediate certain things. It helps and set a bar in terms of comparing yourself to other vendors as well too. So I think that's been I shouldn't say surprising trend, but a very much welcome trend in terms of the US government being more at ease with using in storing, processing data at the high impact level in a cloud environment.
I think some of that is coming from the comfortability with just cloud services more generally, and some of it is they're realizing the challenges of doing it on premise and be able to get it. So if we move this data, these applications off prem and take advantage of all the things that folks like Splunk and others can help with. The other side of this is you mentioned this FedRAMP PMO and the new direction it's heading. We've seen a lot of new initiatives and new ways over the last year or so. Do you get a sense that again, compliance, dealing with risk, understanding the risk of the cloud services is becoming, again, we'll use the word easier, but maybe that's not the best word, maybe less complex. I'll go there.
Yes and no. So I think some of the things that have been understood from the past in terms of the controls and requirements that have been stable are more understood. I think we're getting into a new age of incoming threats. So to AI, for instance, all these new, it's going to be the new items that are going to take some time to ingest and process from the federal government perspective and provide guidance to customers like us, any members that support the federal government anyway, too.
One thing when we talk about the comfortability and the less complexity with FedRAMP, this is leading us down the path of CMMC, right? We're just getting started here, and hopefully there's some lessons learned from those of us and like you all that went through FedRAMP and now also can now go through the cybersecurity maturity model certification. I know from talking to both the DoD folks and folks in the civilian world, both are watching this very closely. Let's talk a little bit about the CMMC piece. Rules are just out. We have more details. What are some of those things that vendors now need to keep in mind?
Yeah. First off, I think what the DoD has released, it's been a journey. We can just say that. It's been almost 5 years now since they released their early CMMC 1.0. I'm glad they were able to stick with it and release a new 2.0 version that was really based off of feedback as well, too, from customers like us, customers entirely throughout the day. So I think this is a better streamlined version of what was available, and I'm really glad they stuck through it. And I appreciate all the hard work that was put into it as well, too. I've reviewed so much CMMC materials from the 3 PAOs, or I should say C3 PAOs. I've reviewed it from the actual document itself and all DoD guidance. And really what it comes down to is the DoD really just wants to make sure people who are storing FCI and CUI are able to store this data, process it, transport it in a secure manner. It's not going to be perfect. I think that's the one thing that a lot of executives have a trouble understanding is that if you have a finding on your CMMC report, it's not the end of the world most of the time. There's going to be some things that you will have to do, and it's going to be an issue, but there's almost going to be no such thing as a CMMC perfect report as well, too. And I think the DoD understands that. There's supposed to be a poem attached to this as well, too. This is going to be a living and breathing thing. And for instance, there may be items like log4j that come up. That took a lot of effort from the federal government to make sure that this could be remediated as well, too. This is not going to be a one-time audit. This is not going to be my auditors coming in, if it's applicable to me, for instance, at the level 2, where an auditor is supposed to come in most of the time and assess you against the standards of CMMC. This isn't going to be, I'm going to stand up these controls just in time for my auditor to show up. This is supposed to be a continuous process. This is supposed to be improvement on those processes over time, too. I think the number one thing, too, that customers really need to focus on, or I should say 2 things, because they really go hand in hand, is scoping. Scoping is so important for our customers, or any customer. It's understanding where your data flows and how that's managed, and also what services are responsible for managing that data, too. Your scope doesn't just include where your data is stored and processed. It includes items that are fulfilling your CMMC requirements, that are administering to that environment that is holding that CMMC data as well, too. For instance, your scanner, your vulnerability scanner is going to be in scope, making sure it's updated. The second part of that, too, is documentation. one of the struggles I saw as an advisor was making sure there's a repeatable process in place at an organization. And I think I remember a really great conversation with one of the most brilliant engineers I ever worked with at Splunk. He's no longer with us, but uh, I remember asking him one time. Engineers are kind of known for being like compliance, ugh, like, I don't want to deal with it. I totally understand. It seems like a rule book that you're supposed to follow, and these people that don't necessarily understand how your system works, how you developed it, and they come in and they act like they know everything. I get it. But I think one of the things I took away from him when I asked him, hey, do you think FedRAMP has actually helped us in terms of delivering a secure solution to customers? He's like, I think it's really helped the whole company, to be honest. We've been able to strategize better. We've been able to document better. We have a better documented process for how we deliver these solutions. And so we have a repeatable process as well, too. No one's going to stay at your company forever. And when you have somebody leave, that's sometimes the biggest issue for some customers. And DIB members as well, too. You need to figure out how to make sure these controls that you need in place for CMMC have a repeatable process so that people who come in can make sure that you maintain that CMMC compliance as well, too. And documentation is the key to that. Making sure you have run books, making sure you address all of your controls, whether it be in policies and procedures, however you may do it.
Dan, we're just about out of time, but I just want to go back to one thing you said. I think the compliance, while people go, ugh, or oh no, or it really does make people better. And from your perspective, have you seen an increase around whether it's FedRAMP or the beginnings of CMMC? Have you seen your clients and Splunk itself gotten better about these not compliance regimes, but what compliance is trying to achieve, how you protect data, how you secure the cloud? Have you just seen over the last few years a change of, I'll say, attitude?
I think that's a good way of putting it. I think that what we see from compliance is a baseline of like, hey, these are the basics you're supposed to be doing. You should be doing to protect, secure this type of data. It's not meant to be an end all be all. You're not supposed to be like, I'm done after 110 controls. It's a starting point for you to understand of how do I make sure I have a environment and culture of making sure we protect this data. I think the other thing too is we have so many competing frameworks as well too. PCI, a customer never comes to us and says, hey, like I only have CMMC requirements, or hey, I only have FedRAMP requirements. It's always a combination of PCI, FedRAMP, ISO, any new emerging compliance frameworks, CSA star level 2, and here at Splunk, we're really trying to meet those customer demands as well too, and help map those for customers to help them understand like, hey, we're able to help you solve these issues by providing a cloud offering that helps satisfy all those items so you can focus more on the items you really need to focus on for your own application or any other service that you may be using Splunk Cloud for. That's really, I think, where we're trying to help our customers at.
All right, Dan, I very much enjoyed our conversation. Unfortunately, we are out of time for this session. So Dan Burns is a compliance senior manager for global technical interlock at Splunk. Dan, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
I'm Jason Miller, and you're watching Federal News Network. Now let me send you back to the studio for more from the Risk and Compliance Exchange.